the cage for a while. People got mad. You saw it happen.
No, he's not in. Johnny Christian cat ears is like a cat.
Are we rolling? Okay.
Oh, you got it.
All right. Hi, kids.
Hi!
Hi, Donnie. I can't believe that.
Hi, Santa Claus!
So what we're talking about today is video games, because I figured I liked video games when I was your age. And so
Video games.
kids always like what the adults like, right? That's just a normal thing that goes on. So what we're talking about now is multiplayer video games and online gaming, and how that didn't used to be something that you were able to do. And we wanted to do it very much. And we put a lot of work into figuring out very crafty, strange, interesting ways of making it happen. And I'm going to try and walk you through the major bullet points, like the major steps in our evolution of getting from not being able to play against anyone besides a computer to where you're at now with Minecraft and World of Warcraft, where you can play against literally millions of people at a time. And hopefully you'll be able to come along with me on this, and we'll see what happens. So long ago, when you wanted to play a game against somebody, there was no internet. There was no way of you pulling out your laptop and going to anywhere and getting on the Wi-Fi and firing up your game and just having a million people out there to play with. You had to have real life friends. And I know a lot of us, like me, who are really into video games aren't really good at real life friends. But back in the day, you had to get a lot of people who all had computers, which in itself was strange. And you had to coordinate with everybody and get everyone to agree that on this day, on this night, we're all going to go to Frank's house. This was Frank. And we're all going to bring all of our computers. And these were desktop computers. These weren't laptops. These were big, heavy, very heavy computers. And we would drag our computers and our monitors and our keyboards and our mice, and we would all go to Frank's house. And we would run wires between all of our computers under the table so that we could just play a game. And this was a monumentous occasion. You would do multiplayer gaming maybe once or twice a year if you were lucky, just to be able to get this rolling. And we would, because it took so long to set up and everything, you'd play for like 12 hours. And you'd bring your Mountain Dew and your chips, and you were there for hours and hours and hours, just playing one game for like 12 hours. But it was really cool because you had all your best friends in the same room with you. And when you killed some guy over here, you hear him screaming, and you get that really satisfying when you kill him with a headshot. You'd be like, "Ah, no!" And he's right there, and you're like, "Yeah!" And that's something we don't get with multiplayer gaming anymore. I mean, you hear some kids screaming at you in your headset, maybe, but it's not Frank. And something about getting to kill Frank is really was excellent. But this was really difficult to do because you had to carry all this equipment everywhere. And a lot of us didn't have cars. I think here we were age, some of these kids were age 13. This is 13 to 16. Most of us weren't driving. So we had to get our moms and dads to drive us back and forth, pick us up at 3 a.m. when we were done playing. It was pretty awful. And so we knew we had to come up with a better way. And the better way was going on. Video game manufacturers realized that we were doing this and were making games for us to play in this kind of setting. The most prevalent one of the time was called Doom, and that was the first one to really have an active multiplayer. Who's seen Doom? I'm sorry.
Yeah.
That's awesome. There's a lot of kids in here. How many kids are lying? Doom was a great game. It was one of the very first-person shooters to incorporate more than 2 players going on. It supported up to 4, which was crazy. and it was so slow. It was so slow. Things would jump around on the screen, monsters would pop up and disappear because your computer was just having trouble dealing with that fact that 4 people wanted to play the game. And we loved it. It was amazing. It didn't work at all, and we would play it for 10 hours at a shot. Games started to get better after a while as computers got faster, and we started playing. Quake was the next one that supported way more players. Towards the end of the original Quake, I'm sorry, these are really hard to see on this thing, but Quake was the first one that really was able to support up to 8 players at a time, and it wasn't jumpy anymore, and things just worked, and it was great. And then we'd also play StarCraft. Who's played StarCraft? The original StarCraft?
I've heard of it, but I've never played it.
You should play it. StarCraft is also one of the most fun games of all time. They got this again also up to a total of 4 players. And it was, again, something you could sink 12 hours into easy. But again, this whole idea of plugging all of this stuff together. There we go. Hang on. We're going back. Thanks for the remote, man. I'm just figuring it out now. Yeah. So all the idea of lugging all this stuff around was terrible. Who would want to do this just to play a game with your friends? Nobody. I didn't. It was awful. You would. You're right. Because we did it. So, a bunch of really smart people in the meantime were working on a way of making all those computers talk to each other over longer distances. And what wires did we have running between everyone's houses at those times, and kind of sort of still now, that still, that we could plug into our computers? Anybody know what this is? Throw up a hand. Nobody? Grown-ups?
You were
at my last talk, you know what?
Yeah.
Who, kids, who knows what this thing is?
It's an outlet for a type of cable.
What type of cable? You're getting close.
HDMI?
A what?
HDMI.
No, it's not HDMI. Telephone. Who knows what a telephone is now? So this is what telephones used to plug into. Telephones, as opposed to like cell phones, they were cell phones, they were phones, you know what phone calls are. But they were stuck to your wall. They were screwed into your wall, and it was the thing you would have to go into whatever room the phone was in and pick it up and use it. And it had a line, a wire that would run into a wall jack that was in most of the rooms in your house. And that's what this was. And that's how we made phone calls at the time, was this massive, massive network of wires that went into everybody's houses in the country. And that was the only way to call them. They had to be home when you called them, or you just couldn't talk to them. And so a lot of really smart people said, hey, we've got these wires running into every house in the country already. Is there some way that we can use that to make all these computers talk to each other that are getting to be in everyone's house? And not just for gaming, but really for all sorts of information sharing. But gaming, of course, is always a huge reason for the advancement of technology. And that's not even a joke. Gaming has done more to push to computing technology forward than any concept of sharing information, which is very funny. And so, one of the things they created to help that along was this thing. Who knows what this thing is? Yeah. It's not a hard drive. It's not a motherboard. It plugs into a motherboard. Yeah, you.
Me? A modem.
Would your dad tell you that?
I confess.
Yeah. This is
It's supposed to be for the kids.
Dave's always the most excited adult in all my talks. This is called a modem. And I know it's kind of hard to see here, but the way a modem works is you plug this whole thing into the motherboard inside your computer. You put this inside your computer, and it added this little jack in the back of it. And what plugged into that jack this guy, or vice versa. You ran a wire between this little thing that was in your wall in your house, and a lot of you probably still have this in your house. Now, if you go home and look for it, you might find a couple. Look in the living room or in the kitchen, maybe stay out of mom and dad's room. But you probably have these running around. You probably never notice what they are, but if you look for them, you're going to see them, and now you're going to know what those are, what they were used for. Because we don't really use telephones in the house anymore, the old wired telephones, because we all have cell phones on us. But most phones have those. And so you would plug this between your computer and the jack in the wall. And you could use that to get out to other people who had the same setup. And this is, we're still talking in this context before the internet. Before you would just go out and just be on the World Wide Web and have a browser and be able to get a Wikipedia and all of that. This we're talking about is still going like one-on-one, talking computer to computer through an existing bunch of wires that have been out there since Alexander Graham Bell first invented the telephone, and it went from there. And it made this really cool sound that I'm going to try to recreate for you. What the other wireless mic?
Just been looking away.
Oh, there it is. All right. No, I know I had it. I know they don't like to give me a lot of microphones. When you would connect to another person's computer to play a game, this is what you would hear. Get ready for this, it's crazy. You can see that okay? Dubstep.
Yeah, those stuff.
Why can't I call anyone?
Some quality good stuff right there.
Get off the phone.
That's so weird. It sounds like slime.
I love playing that in front of a bunch of grown-ups.
Play it
Because they
again.
get this slow smile that creeps across their face, this slow, like, happy place, this look. And yeah, it was a really scary, loud, high-pitched sound. And that was the sound of the computer taking the information that it had to send in all its bits and bytes and converting it into an electrical signal to send across that electrical grid. And when that sound would come out of a speaker, that's what it sounds like when you run electricity. That isn't someone speaking through a speaker. And it would play that to let you know that it was connecting okay, to let you know that the line was clear, etc. And then once it connected, it would cut off. And you would dial directly into other people's computers. And a lot of people would run things on their computers for people to call into. And we call them BBSs, or bulletin board systems. And a lot of these were just like personal websites, but not like you can make a website or a Facebook page on the internet now where you go to a website and you just make it. You actually had to have a whole computer running in your house, and you had to have your phone line connected to it, and only one person could talk to it at a time. That means if somebody else was using the website, nobody else could get to it. You'd have to wait till they were done. If you would try to call, it would tell you it was busy, and you would just have to wait. And people would do really fun things with these, and one of the things they would do is they would play games. But because only one person could use it at a time, the way the multiplayer games worked, they were usually turn-based, if you think the way most board games work. And they were a lot of board games. You could play things like Scrabble and chess and stuff like that on there. But you would dial in, you would go through that horrifying noise. Hopefully it wasn't busy. You would get into this guy's server, this guy's BBS, and you would log in and find the chess game, and you would find your chess game that you've been playing against another guy for 6 months. And you would make you would take your one turn, and then you would save it. And then you would just have to wait until he dialed into the server, did his one turn, and sometimes that took him a week, sometimes that took him 2 weeks, and you would check every day, and he still hadn't taken his turn. Can you imagine playing Scrabble against somebody who takes 2 weeks to take a turn? How long is that game gonna last? And sometimes that guy never takes his turn. He just stopped playing, but he didn't tell you. And you're checking every day for like 2 months, and this guy still hasn't taken his turn, and he's just gone. And you're like, what happened to him? Died, and you never know. And so That was kind of irritating. In the meantime, again, some very smart people, and some of the same very smart people who invented this whole use the telephone to talk to other computers in the first place, were trying to find a way to make it so that multiple people could all be on there at the same time, interacting with each other in real time. Which I know to you sounds stupid and boring because that's all gaming is. But back then, we were all playing Scrabble. And we were having a blast playing Scrabble. And a bunch of guys, some of which who did in fact invent the internet, were coming up with another system called MUD, which stood for Multi-User Dungeon. You get so excited. I love that stuff. And doesn't this look like fun?
Yeah!
The most fun you've ever seen?
Yeah!
This blew our minds! We couldn't believe that this was happening. It's all text. Who's played a game called Zork? Whose parents have made them play Zork? Zork was a text-based game where there was no pictures and there was no graphics and no characters. It was all, the computer told you what was happening. And then you told the computer what you would like to do. And then the computer told you it doesn't understand what you're saying because it's a computer. And then you would do that, and that was fun.
I don't understand. This is fun.
Yeah, and man, how many people have played Zork all the way through? 12 times. It's me and him. What these guys did is they found a way to make a bunch of people be in the same kind of realm. So that if you said, walk to the room to the north, and you would go in this room to the north, they would say, there are 16 people in this room. And you'd say, who is here? And it would tell you all of these people who were in this room who you didn't know, who were just on computers in other houses, sometimes in other countries. And you could talk to them and you could trade items like you do in all your video games now, and isn't that all interesting? But back then, this was crazy. But it was still the same thing with just text because that's all the computing power we had at the time. To be able to handle that many people doing that many things, it was like, you don't get graphics. Reading is the most fun. Who needs TV when you got a book, right? And that's and there it was. And this was how we played with books. And it was great, and it was fun, because really, you were told something, and in your head, you automatically just imagined what something really looks like. And a lot of times, it's better than any graphic designer was going to come up with. So it was, in fact, really cool. Who knows Dungeons and Dragons, like the tabletop? Like dice and pen and paper. Maybe mom or dad play it once a month with their friends and lock themselves in the basement. I still do. Yeah. Parents, get your kids into Dungeons and Dragons. I don't know what's happening here, but this is bothering me. Yeah. You're really into it. Yeah, so this is how that works, and I won't go deeper into that part. But yeah. But there were complaints of like, what about graphics? Let's get some graphics rolling. Eventually, they did figure that out. And you had this amazement. This was a game called Neverwinter Nights. And it's not the Neverwinter Nights you know. Because, right, the Neverwinter Nights that was on the Xbox didn't look like this. People asked for a refund. The Xbox put out a game that looked like this. But this was one of, if not the most popular of that online multiplayer, multi-people running through a dungeon game where they tried to add graphics to it. And this is about the best that they could do at the time. And it was amazing. We saw this and we lost it. We flipped out over this. I mean, look, you've got a guy, right?
That's Drow.
Staple of any video game. What's that?
They're Drow.
Okay. You really Dude, I was 8.
They have trees.
We weren't all 40 when this game came out, Dave. Yeah.
I wasn't dating.
Why does it say Catholic?
You've got maybe a zombie. It had logs, so like if you guys were into trees, we had trees, both alive and dead. So this game had everything. This was top notch, but actually it was really cool. A big point of what it really did have that was foreshadowing of things to come forever and ever was people insulting each other on the internet. You guys didn't invent this. This has been around forever. But it was a really fun game. Again, because the whole concept of being able to come across strangers and interact with them in a relatively safe environment and trade items with them and the like was just unheard of. There was no way for you to go and just chat with a guy who lived in Korea in 1991. And when this happened, you could, and you were meeting people who lived around the world in different lands and different cultures, different languages. And it was amazing because you didn't know anything outside of the town you lived in. You didn't know Texas, let alone Korea. And it's really hard to get that across these days because when you grow up with the internet, you go, yeah, there's Korean websites I can go to. They have better news. Like, this is how it was. This is how sheltered we were. The fact that I can come online and talk to Cashlyn, who's a girl my age who lives in New Jersey, was crazy. Because otherwise, the only strangers you met were people whom you went to school with, kids you met in your class. So to come across someone who's also your age, a kid your age who likes the stuff you like, and play a game with them just on the internet, mind-blowing. And then, graphics proceeded to get better and better. We all know that. Sorry again, these are really hard to see on the projector. But they really started getting rid of all of the slowness and the latency problems, the problems where characters were jumping around, the animation was really slow and stupid, and when you try to shoot somebody, you'd be shooting them, but you weren't really because they were actually gone, but your computer was too slow to figure that out. Gaming kept making computers get faster and faster, and the graphics got better and better, and we eventually got to push technology to the point where we were saying this whole action of like using the telephone to connect to other computers is just not fast enough to play video games on. And instead of us going, I guess we just won't play video games, we yelled really loud. And we bought so many video games, and video games became such a big staple of America that people started inventing and quickly rolling out cheaper ways of getting faster and faster internet connections until finally people started getting what was called ISDN, or what we have now, which is called broadband, which pretty much eliminated any kind of that slowness. But as it was starting up, there was still what was called latency. And if you had a bad internet connection, or if somebody had a faster internet connection than you would still run into this problem, especially these first-person shooters where you're pushing the button, but it's not shooting them because their internet connection is faster. And how frustrating is that? And that was a big problem that we had to deal with. And you would do the craziest things to the wires in your house and to your computer to try and make it a millisecond faster. 1/1000th of a second faster, 10/1000ths of a second faster, because that was just the latency. But that's how fast these games can react. And that's how fast they react now. To where if you're that much slower than the person on the other side, you're dead. We all know that. And so the whole concept of rolling out fast internet to the houses was based heavily on what we were demanding as people who played video games. This wasn't scientists and doctors and schools going, we can't get to Wikipedia fast enough. This was you and me going, my game's too slow, I keep getting killed, we need the internet to work better or I'm gonna get the internet from some other company. And these internet companies listened and kept trying to make things faster and faster for cheaper and cheaper. And eventually, we really got to that point, and computer gaming kind of smoothed out, and now we're at where we are now. We started with Unreal. Who remembers Unreal before Unreal Tournament? Yeah. Unreal, which is what this is. This was the deathmatch mode. It was the one you could play online, and it was a first-person shooter, and really there's nothing that special about it now. But it was the first one where you could do like 8-on-8s and tons of weapons. It was all about who was the fastest with the mouse, and when you were doing that, you needed the fastest internet connection. And so games like Unreal is really what pushed that. And then we had a Unreal Tournament, and then we had Counter-Strike. Come on, you guys know Counter-Strike, Team Fortress, blah, blah, blah. And now here we are with World of Warcraft, with Minecraft, where you've got millions of people on a server at any given time. It all works out great. So that's cool for all the computer people. But there were a lot of people, especially at the time, who couldn't afford computers. Computers were really, really expensive. And so people who couldn't afford computers, they're still playing consoles like Nintendo and Super Nintendo. Who's ever played an original Nintendo entertainment system? I'm going to Super Nintendo.
I want to play an NES or SNES, but
You got to find one, right? The vast majority of us who couldn't afford computers, which was nearly everybody, that's what we had, if we even had that. And so we were kind of left in the dark as far as playing online with, like playing with our friends. You had to have somebody come over. You had to have a second player. You had to have a friend come to your house and physically play there. Otherwise, that was it. Until this company called X-Band came out. Who knows what X-Band is? What grown-ups have seen this? I love throwing this at people, because nobody's seen this, but it was incredibly popular at the same time. This was a company who made this adapter here, where you plug your game into the top, and this adapter, and again, I'm sorry, it's hard to see, it's got a jack on the side of it where you plug a wire in. And guess where that wire goes? To the phone line. There's the phone jack in your wall again. And that let you, with your old Super Nintendo that didn't even have this capability at all before, that would let you dial out to the internet again. You plug it in like that, right at the top, and you plug a phone cord in the side here. And it would dial out, and you could find other people hanging out in like a lobby that were also wanted to play the game that you wanted to play. And you could play 2 players with them, just 2 players, as if they were sitting right next to you. And that was crazy, because before, there was nothing like that on a console whatsoever. And they would hold tournaments, and they would give away prizes on this X-Band network. For who remembers NBA Jam? This was a screenshot. NBA Jam? No. And that was crazy, because you were doing it with your game console. And that got so popular, and internet gaming got so popular on computers that eventually they started building these modems directly into consoles. This is a Dreamcast. Who's even heard of a Sega Dreamcast? Nice. Yeah. Sega Dreamcast was one of the best consoles of all time. It was way ahead of its time, and it came with the ability to add in either a network, a modem, or a LAN port that would hook up to your home computer network. And that was the first one. It wasn't the first one to do that, but it was the first one to have a lot of games meant to be played online multiplayer. And that was a huge draw for the Dreamcast. And then after that Dreamcast caught on, people were seeing it's working. We're getting broadband in every house. Everyone's got fast internet. Microsoft put out that original Xbox, which was the first console to have that network jack right in the back. Plugs into your home network, because now everyone's starting to get the internet in their house. It's becoming ubiquitous, and we all want to play online with all of our friends. And the Xbox Live were the first ones to actually pull it off. And ever since then, the vast majority of console gaming has been online as well. It's rare you find a good single player or couch multiplayer game anymore, and it's all really thanks to Microsoft and the Xbox Live and how they made that so easy for everyone to get onto and accessible for everybody. So that is the quickest version of the evolution of multiplayer gaming I've been able to throw together. I understand a lot of it is hard to understand because you grew up with all of this already existing, and it's hard to understand a world where this never was. But that's what it was like for us. I hope this was at least kind of a fun glimpse into the past. And yes, question?
What about Ari?
Who?
Like the game with the joystick, Ari.
Oh, there was a lot of stuff I had to Atari was way before any kind of multiplayer game. It was still just the old
My
two players.
dad has like the full joystick.
Yeah, I was trying to keep this down to just like actually the evolution of multiplayer. And I hope that's what I did. And I hope this was fun for you guys. See you later.
All right. Web app students, web app workshop. Let's go, guys.
He's the best. Man.
Everybody knows the web app workshop.